Kyren says, hi, I've been a listener for a while and I want your honest opinion. Should I buy Bitcoin right now? Are you bullish on Bitcoin? So I'll kick this one off. I have roughly 1.7-ish Bitcoin left. As you guys know, I had about 2.2, 2.5, something like that. I forget the exact number I had. It was about $250,000 worth of Bitcoin. And I, over the last, let's call it like couple months, as we've experienced some volatility after the Trump administration and things of that nature, I've been taking some profits, right? I think I took about 15 to 20% off the table. I did this around 85 to 89,000 dollars per coin is when I took those profits, and I've got about 60, 70-ish thousand of cash now, like from that account that I've since deployed elsewhere. And I am not actively buying Bitcoin at the moment because I bought a bunch of it in the beginning of 2023, knowing that I've got an entry and I've got an exit strategy. I very much dollar cost averaged into Bitcoin in 23 and 24. I deployed about $100,000 into it, and now it's worth about $250,000. And I'm in the exit strategy part of my plan, which means I'm just dollar cost averaging out of it, right? I sold some at 85, 87. I sold some more at 89, 88. I'll sell some at 95, 100 if we get there, right? Like, my plan with any investment is to have a clear entry and a clear exit strategy. I've laid this out countless times, actually, ever since like January and again in March inside the Rich Habits Network. Robert and I are very transparent with what we're buying and selling and when we do it and why we do it. So if you've not yet joined the Rich Habits Network and you want those insights, they're all posted inside of there for our members to go check out. But I'm now in the exit portion of my Bitcoin, and I plan to be 80 to 90% out of my Bitcoin. I plan to have a little bit, right? I never want to get out of the asset class completely, but I plan to move out about 80 to 90% of it. If we go up to 120, 140, right, somewhere in that range, I plan to reallocate elsewhere, put it into some undervalued single stocks, maybe some NEOS funds, things of that nature.
So here goes. I'm on the Bitcoin maximalist side of this equation. I have not taken profits in Bitcoin, and I'm not saying you should do the same. I have not taken any profits in Bitcoin since 2017. And so for me, I am in the boat that I still believe by, let's call it 2030, we will see a minimum of a $500,000 Bitcoin by that date. That's what I think the minimum is for me. So for me, always take profits along the way, like Austin stated. If you're not as bullish and maybe as crazy as I am, that's okay when it comes to cryptocurrency. But in my opinion, I'm not taking any more profits, and I'm still accumulating along the way when I can in Bitcoin specifically, because I just believe the upside potential is so large that I don't think I'll find a better place to put money over the next 5 or 6 years. But also you have to remember, I started buying Bitcoin in 2011. So I had a big head start on most people. That shouldn't affect how you think about Bitcoin now if you're starting today or you started in 23 or 24. But I agree with Austin 100%. Understand why you're buying it. Understand your entry and your exit strategy. And a good rule of thumb that I've always used is when I buy something, when it goes up 50%, I take off 25%. When it goes off up 50% again, I take another 25%, and I do that until I'm totally out of the position with my own money and I'm playing with house's money. So I totally agree with Austin on that standpoint. The only difference is I'm not at a point right now where I'm going to sell any Bitcoin until probably, and we've talked about this many times, till probably $300,000. When it gets to that, I'd probably seriously consider selling a bunch.
So something really interesting is happening with Bitcoin over the last couple of weeks. It's decoupling from the NASDAQ and the rest of the stock market. I think over the last year or so, Bitcoin was kind of acting as a high beta, high volatile tech stock, essentially, right? NASDAQ would go up, Bitcoin would go up. That hasn't been the case over the last couple of weeks. It's decoupled, whereas Bitcoin was going up while the rest of the stock market stayed flat. That to me is very interesting. I think something interesting is happening here. I'm not as much of a Bitcoin maxi as Robert is. I do think it's important to have some exposure in your portfolio like I do. That's my 2 cents. I talked about it on the rundown on the podcast. Is like the decoupling is happening. Keep your eye on Bitcoin. I think it's the most interesting that it's been in a long time because of the behaviors over the last couple weeks. And maybe it means more central banks all over the world are going to buy it because of some potential shakiness in the US dollar. We're seeing the same thing happen with gold. Gold is hitting all-time highs. Maybe Bitcoin will finally fulfill its promise as being digital gold. I haven't felt that way in a long time until just recently because of what's happened over the last couple weeks.
So just to put some numbers around what you're saying, right? Bitcoin is actually year to date in the green, about 0.5% as of this recording, whereas the Nasdaq is down about 10% and the S&P is down about 6% year to date. So to your point, yeah, Bitcoin is sort of acting as this like digital gold, kind of being in the green while the markets are more in the red.
So Zaid, I'd love to have your thoughts. I said 2030. Where's Bitcoin's price at 2030, in your opinion?
I think it could get to, two to 300,000, like you mentioned. I mean, I don't really have a price target. I just like to follow like the macro of like what's going on. And no one really owns Bitcoin as far as like the big money players, the central banks. Yes, we have ETFs and things like that. And yes, these ETFs are starting to get bigger and bigger. But like, how many central banks are actually buying Bitcoin yet?
Right.
I think that to me is the key question. If we start seeing real activity there, and because of more volatility in the US dollar, that to me is the biggest question, is like that could just moonshot Bitcoin to 250, 300 if we see that inflow over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear from you, is understanding if there's that much buying pressure, which then puts, this pressure on the amount of Bitcoin available, would it be directly correlated to price appreciation? I think so. You just alluded to it and said yes. So good. I really like this question because it's such a simple question, yet we can make it really complicated, or we can just discuss our beliefs like we did and then go from there and see what happens. Because like you both said, I think everyone should own it. And it's just depending on how much of your portfolio, how risk on you want to be, and what your out strategy is. I love Austin's out strategy because he's taking profits along the way, which a lot of people don't do, but he's still staying in the sector. And I think that is the best strategy you can implement.